Everybody, this is Jackie Luqman.
And I'm Shahi Luqman.
And this is a special edition of Coffee Current Events in Luqman Nation, live on Coffee Current Events in Luqman Nation, because tonight we're trolling the state of the dysfunction address. We have it on the television over here. He's saying things that we're going to read the transcript from for tomorrow. But we're really not going to pay much attention to what he's saying because we know it's all a bunch of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And things that we have to do, the work that we have to do in our communities, the work that we do in our communities is way more important than what this guy has to say, which, I mean, we can guess what he's going to talk about, like the economy, and we're going to try to tell you why some of the stuff he's saying about the economy is just a bunch of BS, because they never tell you the whole truth. The black unemployment rate, but we also really need to have conversations that we always, about issues that we always need to have, regardless of what Trump says or does, and really regardless of who is in office. So we've had this on for like what 5 minutes now,
Yeah,
while we've been setting up, and these people, it's like I think it's interesting whenever I watch the State of the Union address, right? Because whichever side of the room favors the president can't stay in their seat because they're always standing up and clapping at their BS.
Right.
And I mean it's like a tantric religious service where they're praying to their, they're genuflecting and they're getting up and they're ooh yay, and it's just ridiculous, the kind of stuff they're saying. But what do you got to say, hun, while we kick this trolling session off?
Well, first of all, the reason why that it's first of all, I'd like to welcome everybody out there in Luqman Nation for joining us this evening. We're broadcasting on our regular time, outside of our regular time, which is actually tomorrow, because we are coordinating with a bunch of other activists. It's a reason why we're on tonight. There is a coordinated effort on the part of local activists everywhere called the State of Resistance movement, and we're a part of that. We have gotten the call from other activists, and not only are we on live, but other activists across the country who are also participating in the State of Resistance movement are also live. And basically, it's what it is. It's the state of resistance. Trump is doing his State of the Union. We're doing the State of Resistance. And there's a few things that we want to talk about through doing this show. And one of the things is the fact that Jackie talked about the black unemployment rate, and black people have been mentioned and been at the center of controversy the last couple of days, and Jay-Z and many of you know about that. What we want to talk about the truth behind the numbers. Trump, like other presidents before him, is taking a lot of credit for stuff that he hasn't done, and he's patting himself on the back for this so-called low black unemployment rate that's happening right now. And we just want to examine how true that is. And we also want to talk about why we, as black people, and people in general, why we should not listen to celebrities when it comes to giving political discourse, and why black people in particular, we need to stop listening to the Jay-Z's and and the Oprahs and all the rest of them. Yeah, all the rest of them when it comes to our issues. Jay-Z, and we're going to talk about that. I think that it was a real disappointment of Jay-Z's response, and the fact that Van Jones, who got his own show on CNN, they finally paid him off, and he got his own show, and of course he went to Jay-Z, which to me was a safe choice. But we're going to get into this. But the first thing we want to talk about is this thing about the black unemployment rate. You've heard many of you who have been following us have heard plenty of times that we've covered this issue. We covered what that the black unemployment rate, what it has been traditionally in this country, and it's always been for the most part consistently twice that of the national average. Now it appears, and because because we don't really have a media anymore that informs us about these things, truly inform us about these things, we're left to believe that all of a sudden now black unemployment is not a problem anymore.
Right.
Because the statistics that have just been released is that unemployment is at an all-time low, and it is. It is. That we would give. But the numbers don't tell the numbers doesn't tell the whole story.
Right.
And so now we're left to believe that, oh well, hey, black unemployment is at an all-time low. Or is it?
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's really not, because when politicians of any stripe, I don't care who it is, but since we're talking about this guy who's on, in the who's in the White House now, who is standing at this podium, spreading this misinformation about the low black unemployment rate, among other pieces of misinformation. What no politician tells you, and we got to thank our friends, not just friends of Coffee, Current Events, and Politics, but our personal friends who respond with information on our posts, on our personal pages, that give us information that we had not considered before. And today I learned something new. But let me go to what we already know about the unemployment rate. Even though the unemployment rate for black people has decreased down to about 6 point something percent. Now, Trump is taking credit for that. Like, at his policies, he actually has said, and I'm telling you he's going to say it tonight if he hasn't already said it. He said that his policies are the reason that black unemployment rate is down around 6%. Well, here's the first problem with that. What policies? What policies?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, he's only been president a year, and then you figure like that half the year he stumbled. I mean, half the year he hasn't done anything.
Exactly. Look,
like for the first 7 months.
Exactly. So what policies that he specifically advanced that contributed to the decline in the black unemployment rate? That's the first problem. The second problem is, as much criticism as we have for President Obama and some of his policies, we're always honest to give every politician, public figure, whoever it is, credit when credit is due. So the unemployment rate in general started declining during Obama's presidency. That was so the unemployment rate being low the first year under Trump's presidency really has nothing to do with anything Trump did, none of his policies. The unemployment rate began declining significantly from the end of the Great Recession after Obama's policy, after during the Obama administration. Now, having said that, the criticism that people always threw at Obama, which was absolutely valid, on the decline in the unemployment rate during his presidency, was that the numbers didn't reflect full-time employment for people. Even though people had jobs, those jobs were many times either not full-time or they were minimum wage jobs. So those are factors that people were real quick. Okay, let's be honest. The GOP Republicans were real quick to throw at Obama when he touted his policies decreasing the unemployment rate. But all of a sudden, these very same people, that those things don't exist. They don't matter. And the same thing is true of the unemployment rate being low now. The same questions about how much money these people are making, are these full-time jobs, and they're not, a lot of them are still valid questions. So those are the things we know. Mm-hmm. And then the third thing that we know, that we have always known, that we always talk about here in Coffee, Current Events, and Politics, and this is something, again, that regardless of who's president, this is an issue that black people have to contend with as far as pushing for policies that address black issues.
Right.
So this isn't a Trump issue. We're not talking about this just because Donald Trump is issuing his first State of the Union. We talked about this under Obama several times. The fact that even though the black unemployment rate is around 6 point something percent, and it is the lowest that it's been in many, many years, it is still twice as high. These people are standing up again for like the third time in the past 2 minutes.
They're going to continue to keep standing.
And Melania is sitting there looking like, the ice queen that she. I'm sorry, I'm distracted. Even the black unemployment rate, as low as it is still twice that of the white unemployment rate. I don't care how low the black unemployment rate is, if it is still twice that of the white unemployment rate, and the black unemployment rate, regardless of what the percentage has always been twice that of the white unemployment rate for more than 50 years. That's still a problem. So what that says, hun, is that even though fewer black people allegedly, because we're going to get into the stuff that we learned today, fewer black people allegedly are unemployed, there is still racial discrimination in the workplace that keeps twice as many black people from getting a job as white people. That is still true. And it looks like we've got some connection problems, so let's see what's going on with this. I hope we're not losing our connections here. So it is still very true that the black unemployment rate is twice as high as the white unemployment rate, has been for 50 years. That's not maintained because black people don't want to work. Clearly that's not true. That can only be maintained, our unemployment rate being twice as high as white people's unemployment rate, by an external manipulation of forces that keeps twice as many black people out of jobs as white people. That's still true. That's still a problem. And that's not something that you're going to hear from the GOP. That's not something you've ever heard from the GOP. But the thing that's disturbing that you brought up is that's also something that we don't hear a lot of from the Democrats. So from our so-called friends.
Right.
Right?
That's right.
Now these are the things that we've always known. These are because we've always talked about this. But this is what we learned today, and this is something else that we've got to focus on. Oh, they found a token black guy. And he's sitting there looking so uncomfortable, like, oh God, don't call on me. Hey, here I am. Here's what we learned today from our friend Joe G.K. In New York City, who we hope to visit when we go up there.
Mm-hmm.
Joe said that we should take a look at, instead of the unemployment rate, we should take a look at the labor percentage rate. Is that
participation?
The labor participation rate? That's what it is. Now we're gonna have to do a whole nother show on this, an entire another show.
Kind of look like a young Forrest Whitaker, that guy. Without the eye.
Without the eye, but then we got to see him from the back to see if he got that neck roll back there. So the labor participation rate is an interesting number, because it clearly shows that about the same percentage of white men as black men are in the labor force, meaning they are employed or actively looking for a job.
Yeah.
Right? So, number one, this whole idea of black people being lazy and don't want to work, the labor participation rate completely dispels that lie.
I mean, but we know that, but we know that's not true.
We know it wasn't true,
yeah,
but people,
you gotta give
people numbers.
Yeah, I mean,
improve.
We're still sitting here, have to use, but we know that black folks work, because how else we gonna make? All of us don't sell drugs and loose cigarettes and all that other kind of stuff.
What do you mean we don't?
No, we don't. But I want with this thing, because when you were telling me about it today,
mm-hmm.
It can get a little confusing.
Yeah.
And I want to try to see if we can make this as simplified as possible.
Yes. Yeah, and I'm gonna let me try to do this. And like I said, we're gonna have to do a whole show on this, and we'll give you charts and all that kind of stuff. We're just not gonna do it tonight. It's just something I want you to think about, because this is the kind of stuff black people have to be working on all the time, regardless of who is in the White House. Because we've got a labor participation rate that is pretty much equal among black men. That's pretty close to that of white men.
About 6 points off. 70% white men, 64%.
Right. Black men are actively in the labor force. They either have a job or they're looking for a job. Here's where the problems come in. We're just talking about black men. Number one, we all know that black people are severely underreported. Black unemployment is severely underreported in this country. Severely underreported. So that twice as high as white people unemployment rate, it's actually probably worse than that. The other problem with the labor participation rate number, as it was explained to me, was that it doesn't only include it includes people who are working either full-time or part-time, or who are actively seeking a job.
Right.
It does not take into account people who are working part-time who are looking for full-time work. That's a major issue right there, because the rates of underemployment for black people compared to white people, enormous and enormously underreported. So this is why the black unemployment rate is lower than it's ever been. It's bull. It's absolute bull. And then you have, now that's just the men. And then someone commented and said that the labor participation rate also doesn't take into account the people who meet the end of their unemployment benefit dates. And then those people are dropped off the unemployment roll. So there's all this stuff that's not reported, not taken into account. that are active forces in keeping black people underemployed, unemployed, and unable to get a job and support their families, that contribute to the wealth gap, the income gap, the opportunity gap. Every racial gap exists that does not accurately reflect the realities from this low unemployment rate they're touting tonight on the State of the Union. This is the fight that we always have to fight in order to get our story straight and tell the truth about our experiences in this country. So then that's just the men. And I hope that was kind of clear. Again, we're going to have another show where we talk about this. Lord, this is like the 8th time they have stood up. These people, why don't they just stay standing and just stop distracting? So, but then the unemployed, the labor participation rate of women was extremely interesting to me. And if you're not like a statistics junkie like I am, and not like like data nerds like we are, you'll completely miss it. Completely miss it. But the labor participation rates for white women have historically, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics data, have historically been around 50, creeping up towards 60%. So pretty much half of white women in this country can afford not to be in the labor market at all. They can just afford not to work. They're not working. They're not working part-time. They're not even looking for a job.
Not even Mary Kay.
Not even Mary. Oh, that's another thing. I don't know. We don't know if those kinds of home-based businesses are included in this labor market thing. That's a good point.
I don't think they are.
I don't think they are.
No.
I don't think they are. That's another very good point. But traditionally, a lot of white women, at least have, historically, haven't even participated in the labor market. As opposed to black women who participate in the labor market at a rate similar to white men. More black women, almost 70% of black women historically, are participating in the labor market. They either have full-time jobs, have part-time jobs, or are looking for work. A full 70% of all black women in this country.
But this is the reason why that I keep on trying to tell white women progressives, stop hitching your wagon to black women. And I say stop hitching your wagon to black women, and tell black women to stop hitching your wagon to white feminism, because it's not equal. Now here you are, you're just talking about right now about how the labor participation rate amongst black women is higher even than black men, and there's reasons for that. The major reason is the fact that black men have been marginalized a lot in the employment in employment. Black women are better educated than black men in this country. Black women have been given a lot more, have benefited more than black men when it comes to affirmative action and other programs that have seen black women enter into fields that they traditionally weren't in.
Right.
You know, I mean, I remember during the time when my father, who drove a bus for New Jersey Transit for years, I remember when a lot of black women started entering in those fields, and you know, and when black women started entering into police departments, and you know, and a lot of that had to do not only with affirmative action, but a lot of that had to do that black women were becoming better educated than black men. Black men were facing, black men were subjected to mass incarceration, sub-education.
Right.
Yeah.
Substandard education.
Substandard education.
A disproportionate expulsions from school.
I mean, black men had a lot of issues that kept them basically from entering the workforce in the numbers that maybe they could have.
External issues.
External issues, right. So what I'm saying is that it's disingenuous, I think, when you have a lot of white progressive feminists saying, oh, but what about women unemployment? No. you can't look at it like that because the experience of white women and black women in this country are different. You
Mm-hmm.
know, even though there are gender issues that is universal
Right.
between black and white women, but to say that no, sister, is us against them, and it's us against them, we as black people had always understood that no, it's not us against them
Mm-hmm.
because black women and black men have been fighting the same white male patriarchy that has been messing with everybody.
Right.
You know, so you know, I kind of reject that in the sense that you know, we when we want to get honest about what's going on in this country and who is really suffering in this country, we can't make it appear that that all womankind is underneath the foot of white male patriarchy, and that black men are somehow not victims of that also.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think those are excellent points because the data backs up what you say. The data about the labor participation rate and the related pay inequality between not just men and women. No, no. We're talking about the pay inequality between black women and white women in the labor force. Black women are participating in the labor force at a rate of nearly 70% and have been historically, but black women make less money than white women for the
There's the
same
difference.
jobs.
There's the big difference.
More of us are working than white women. More black women are working than white women, and we still make less money than half of the white women. How you can't tell me that all the white women are more educated and more qualified and are just better at those same jobs with the same education and the same experience as black women, because that's also true. That's true for black men and black women. That's true for the difference between uh, black people and white people in the labor force. Black people are paid less on average than white people for the same jobs with the same experience with the same level of education, regardless of whether it's high school dropouts or college graduates. And that this is the kind of stuff we have to deal with all of the time, regardless of what Trump or anybody else in the White House does. It looks like somebody just Sandy just said that she happened to click on it on the State of the Union for a minute, and whatever Trump said, I guess with the black guy in the gallery was a direct shot to take a knee, and he said something about standing for the national anthem. See, this is why this kind of BS window dressing, uh, um, jingoistic, nationalistic garbage that comes from any politician, I don't care who it is dangerous to black people. Because people focus on, oh, well, you're not standing for the national anthem, and you don't love America. But people completely ignore the manipulation of data and the dismissal of facts that we have to keep bringing to the forefront in this discussion, regardless of how fast and loose these people play with the truth.
Well, I mean, you know, I'm just tired of black people just being played all the time. I mean, even with that situation with Sandy just brought up. I mean, of course, we don't have the audio up,
Mm-hmm.
so we don't. I don't know what the extent, you know, what the whole thing was, you know, with the young man there. But I don't know. Look like we got connection problems again.
No, we're good on this end.
Oh,
It's
okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. But you know, I'm just tired of black people really being played by both the Democrats and the Republicans.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, you know, there is no way, and I'll try to make this as plain as I can because I'm a little frustrated. I'm really frustrated because there is no way that any intelligent person can actually accept, unless they're just plain stupid, that this guy who's been president for a year, who hasn't done anything substantial for 7 months, but yet somehow was going to get policy that would. I don't care if you're president of the United States. I don't care if after your first day of swearing in, and your first day arriving for the job at the White House, there is no way that any major policy that you put forward will have immediate effect like that.
That's right. That's right.
So there is no way after 7 months of him, of all the chaos that happened in the White House with Bannon and all this other kind of stuff, the back and forth with Omarosa and all this stuff, and all of the executive orders that didn't mean nothing, and all this stuff, all the crash and burn that was going on inside the White House. There is no way that come November he was going to have policies that was going to immediately affect the unemployment rate, and especially black unemployment rate, that quickly. There's no way that was going to happen.
Right.
So we know that we know that that is just not true. That there is no way that he. But Trump is not unique in that. And what I'm saying is that all presidents have always tried to take credit for something that they didn't do. They were talking about. We remember when George Bush tried to take credit in his first term for the economy, when we know that actually came from Clinton.
Right.
So much so that, at least Bush, I give him credit, he gave his money back.
like we said, we'll give people credit right, where it's due.
But this is the thing, is I really want to start getting to some really, really specific points, why we are doing this. Number one is the fact that this whole state of the resistance movement. And I want to say this to those of us out there who are resistant, is that we really got to start being honest about where we are in this whole political matrix here.
What do you mean?
Well, what I'm saying is the fact that it still appears to me the fact that we still are not understanding. We're still not understanding where we should be resisting at. And I'm saying is like, what I'm saying is that I kind of lost my thought a little bit. But what I'm saying is that we're still looking at it through the thing of feminism. We're still looking at it as, this and that. And you're not, one of the things that anybody knows in war, you cannot go, and that's not to say that we don't address, specific issues. But I think that one of the reasons why we really aren't really effective in dealing and combating the Trumps and all this other kind of stuff is the fact that we're not that we're you can't go into a war already divided. And that's my point. So I can't talk about black men, because if I talk about black men, then people feel like then the women's issues are not being covered.
Right.
I can't talk about women's issues without or black issues without this not being covered. So what I'm saying is the fact that I think that until we kind of coalesce our issues together and realize that that we all have a stake at combat, and I know none of that makes sense.
That's not true. That's not true. I don't think that's true.
I mean, because I'm sitting up here, I got a lot of thoughts in my head, and I'm sitting up here and I'm like, I'm just sick and tired. Here we are mentioned with the black unemployment rate, and I'm sick and tired of when black people are mentioned. It's always these smoke and mirrors. There's always these smoke and mirrors with the unemployment, and then they tried out these people with the kneeling and all this other kind of stuff, and then on the Democratic side, it's no better.
Right.
So I'm just saying is the fact that I'm going to constantly advocate that we really do need, because I want to get into something later on about life under progressive rule, and I had put that on my page about California being the example of what black life is under so-called white progressive rule.
That's a great point, and I think that's a great point because, and I understand what you're saying. Because we are, first of all, the first problem I think we have in this resistance movement, this progressive resistance movement, is that a lot of y'all didn't want to resist anything. Y'all didn't think y'all had anything to resist until Trump showed up. When black people, poor white people, poor Latinos have been fighting against this system. Because, see, Trump is not the problem. I don't know how many times we have to tell people that, but that's true. Trump is not the problem. He is a symptom. He is the natural progression of the problem. And people who are much who were much smarter than we were, who did much grander things than we did or tried to. Many years ago, in the 1900s, with Eugene Debs, who was warning against the need for working class people not to trust either political party, because both political parties in the 1900s were corporate owned and were beholden to corporate interests. In 1900, Eugene Debs was talking about that. And we've got W.E.B. Du Bois, who said the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And what was that, 1959, 1956?
Right. Yeah, that's right.
We've got Martin Luther King Jr., who began the Poor People's Campaign, and who said of politicians, who said to politicians, poor people, and especially poor black people, have been intentionally disenfranchised in this country. And maybe democratic socialism is a better model for people in this country. And we're going to march on Washington, and we're coming to get our check. Martin Luther King Jr. said that. But the only thing y'all ever want to talk about Martin Luther King Jr. is about is how he had a dream. You never want to talk about how he said we coming to get our check. But see, the very same people who are so terrified of Trump now ignore all of those issues, all of those people, the Medgar Evers, the Ida B. Wells, Malcolm X, James Baldwin,
Mm-hmm.
said about how corrupt the entire system is, and warned that what people are terrified of now that's going on in Congress, they knew this was coming, and most of white America in this country didn't listen, because see, it wasn't happening to them. So now we've got a situation where everybody wants to resist, but you want to resist this one guy. You want to resist this one man. So you don't think you have to focus on black issues. But what you do not understand is that the disenfranchisement of black people and other intentionally marginalized groups, that is the thing that is at the foundation of the system that gave us Trump. That's the thing we've been fighting since we've been here. And marginalized people have been telling everybody else that all this time. I had a conversation today online with someone whose name I will not mention. And her whole thing was, because people didn't vote for Democrats, we have Trump. No, we don't have Donald Trump because people didn't vote for Hillary Clinton and people didn't vote for the Democrats. We don't have Donald Trump because people voted for Bernie Sanders. We have Donald Trump because white America ignored all of those other people who tried to warn them that Trump was coming. Didn't know what his name was, but people knew that this system wasn't a democracy a long time ago. So now we're talking about, we need to resist. And people have this idea that they want to resist this system in 2017. But people were trying to tell this country, you need to resist this system in 1856, in 1776. We were cool with resisting British rule in 1776, but we didn't want to take it a step further and make the system equal for everyone. And somehow we thought that wasn't gonna, somehow the majority population in this country thought that wasn't gonna bite them in the behind. Because the majority population sided with the oligarchy then. That is the truth. All of you who are listening, that's why black folks are so frustrated all the time.
I'm just frustrated because I'm frustrated from the hypocrisy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, once again, and I want to move on from this because I got other stuff I want to talk about. I can't, it's still in my crawl when Hillary Clinton, the chief feminist of the Democratic Party who ran for president last year,
Mm-hmm.
how she paraded around the mothers of the movement.
Mm-hmm.
These black women who lost sons through police murders
Mm-hmm.
and police violence, and paraded them around all these other mothers of them. Where they at now?
Right.
Where are they at now? That's the reason why. I mean, that is the reason why white feminists stop hitching your wagons to black women, because black women, just like black people, are being used as nothing but props, and it don't matter what side that you're on. And what really kills me is that who they get to articulate this kind of stuff is people like Jay-Z.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they get people like Jay-Z, whose only relevance is he's a rapper.
Right.
Who made a lot of money.
Right. He's a rich black guy.
He's a rapper who made a lot of money, got some kind of cultural relevance, and somehow, because he rapped and made a lot of money, somehow this makes him eligible to discuss other stuff. This makes him this makes him Paul Robeson now. I was highly disappointed when Van Jones, who played it very safe, Van Jones could have got Dyson.
Oh,
he
wow.
could have went and got West.
Yep.
He could have went and got Farrakhan.
He could have went and got Colt. People gonna be mad at the Farrakhan.
He could have got me. He don't know me, but he could have got me. But what happens is he get Jay-Z up there, and outside of his music, I'm not much of a Jay-Z fan, not anymore. But I mean, to hear this guy, now mind you now, because I have a memory that goes back more than 10 years or 5 years, I remember this same guy who would not stop doing business with a high-end retail store in New York,
Barney.
who was discriminating against black people.
Mm-hmm.
Black young people who were going down to Barney's, buying these overpriced, obscene, these belts that was obscenely overpriced, spending their money because, after all, Jay-Z put his name to it. Then all of a sudden now, Barney's was like, well, these little Negroes shouldn't have this kind of money, so what's happening. And then so there was a little thing with discrimination and stuff, made the news for a little bit. And Jay-Z did what Jay-Z always do. He knew that black folks was mad, so he'd get up there and say, oh, I'm going to talk to him. I'm going to talk to him. I'm going to see what's going on. But Jay-Z's about Jay-Z. And then for this guy to get up here in front of Van Jones and to talk about the unemployment rate, had no statistics. He didn't come at y'all at the audience like we came at y'all with statistics. This is what the government say. This is what it is, and this is why Trump is full of shit.
Right.
He didn't come at it like this. His thing was, well, in the end, it ain't about money, says the billionaire.
Right.
Says the billionaire. Says not only the billionaire, says the one who's married to another billionaire. You know what I mean? Oh no, it's not about money. And then when it gets to the racism part, oh well, it doesn't matter about how you treat me, just pay me well. And I'm sitting up here like, really. And of course, Van Jones, he's starstruck, so he ain't got nothing to say about it. And what I'm saying is the fact that these are the same people like Jay-Z and all these other so-called black celebrities who aren't really connected with those of us in the trenches.
Yep.
That's the reason why I rejected any kind of bid by Oprah to go for president. I reject any of these black celebrities because we're not talking about a Harry Belafonte.
Right, somebody who is actually, boots on the ground, on the streets, in the movement, doing the work.
It's not that you're a celebrity. I don't have anything against you because you're a celebrity. I don't have anything against you because you're a black celebrity. But we ain't talking about Paul Robeson here.
Right.
We ain't talking about Harry Belafonte. We're not talking about Danny Glover.
Right.
We're not talking about these type of folks. We're talking about people who use the black community, they're opportunists, and they use the black community. Jay-Z made his money pathologizing, selling pathology about the black community.
Yep.
That's how he made his money.
That's true.
Long after he left the streets of Brooklyn and became a multimillionaire, he was still rapping about selling drugs and this and that. Yeah. Way when that long was long a part of his life. When that part of his life was long gone.
Yep.
He was still up there talking about that. So he made his money on that, off of that. So now all of a sudden now, he's Nelson Mandela now. You know what I mean? So what I'm saying is the fact that this is what frustrates people like me. And what frustrates people like me is the dishonesty of the media, who have people they can go to. But they don't want to go. And these are the same people, the Oprahs and all of them, because now I'm getting to my second point. Bear with me. My second point is the fact that the Grammys, which I thought was a disgrace. I have stopped watching the Grammys. I don't think I saw a Grammy show since Stevie won the Grammy.
Stevie Wonder, that is.
Yeah,
for
Stevie
those
Wonder.
Of you who
I don't
know.
think I saw a Grammy award since Stevie Wonder won one, and that probably was back in the 80s or something like that. That was like because, I mean, first of all, I think that the Grammys have long since been about music. I think that the Grammys right now, and it has been for such a long time, is about popularity, and that's all it is. It's not about the quality of music anymore. In fact, if you got good quality music, you expect not to get one. But this is another thing that teed me off, and I'm going down my bullet points.
Yep.
Is that this whole thing with the Dreamers? So you had this young Hispanic young lady, I can't remember her name right now. But she gets up there and she says that Dreamers built America. And I understand where she's young. I understand where she was coming from. I understand that this was her way of expressing the importance and value of immigrants. And I understand that. And I'm the first one to say that immigrants have contributed a lot to this country, and they still do. The problem I had is this whole thing of Dreamers built the country. And the reason why I have a problem with that, because she's not the first one to say that.
Right.
Dreamers, we built this country. You know how long that it took for black people in this country to finally get our history told.
Man.
And told correctly. And how much we had to fight to make everyone to have this country acknowledge the fact that the part that black people have given to building this country. And so, when she got up there and said that Dreamers built the country, and I'm saying like, wow, okay, she's young, she don't know. But these Negroes out there, and half of the Grammys was Negroes, they out there clapping for this.
Right.
Nobody, I haven't read anywhere, and I've been searching for it. I haven't read anywhere where anybody, all these so-called conscious rappers and everybody else went there and say, sister, we ain't want to pull your coattail on air, but actually, African slaves built the country.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
African slaves actually built this country, and the fact that again, my point with the Dreamers is the fact that as much as I understand their plight, is the fact that again with this whole progressive thing, we get so tired when we start talking about black issues. We get so overwhelmed. You put articles on the page and you talk about black, and it all gets overwhelmed. But then all of a sudden now, it's like, even with the Dreamers argument, I have not seen Haitians included in that.
Come on now.
And that's the thing. This is my point. I have watched discussions on Dreamers, and guess who's leading the Dreamers discussion? Light skinned, nearly white Latinos. The 60,000 Haitians that's been immediately deported or soon to be deported, they're not part of this. And many of them have kids that are here.
That's right.
Many of them had kids that were born in this country. But yet, I don't see the Latinos in them talking about, what about our Haitian brothers and sisters who's also suffering under this? So my question is, why they're not part of that conversation? And why is it that all of us so-called good progressives and liberals, why aren't we reminding them that, wait a minute, It's not just y'all from Mexico and Central America
Mm-hmm.
and Latin America. We also got 60,000 Haitians who also had children that were born here,
Mm-hmm.
who have to be deported. What about them?
Right. Right.
You know, so what I'm saying is the fact that um, until we can address those type of issues and be honest about, all I'm looking for is a little honesty.
Right. Right.
You know, I'm not looking for this kumbaya feel good stuff. What I'm looking for is the fact that if we say that we're against injustice, then damn the hell, let's be against injustice, and let's remind the dreamers that before they want to take away our legacy or the legacy of our ancestors, let's let them remember too that a lot of the reason why a lot of them are still allowed to stay here is based upon the Civil Rights Act, which we fought for.
That's right. That and I mean, you brought up points that are really hard to discuss in the progressive movement because people always want to claim that you're being divisive or divisive or however people pronounce it.
But it's not
When
divisive. It's not divisive to sit up here on a stage that's being broadcast around the world. That it's not divisive to sit up there and say that my ancestors had nothing to do with building this country.
Right.
That it was the dreamers who did that.
Right. Right. And even to your point where you were saying, you look, I understand what she was trying to say, that people came to this country because they had a dream of a better life. That's not our story.
And damn sure
That's not our story. That is not the story of the descendants of the enslaved Africans who were brought here to. We weren't dreamers when we came here. Our trip to this country was a nightmare. So we're not trying to dismiss people's struggle for their rights right now. We are demanding that the narrative be right in this struggle for justice and equality for people. Because if you don't get the story of the most marginalized right, then what you fight for isn't going to be right. You can't leave out people who have been fighting this struggle for longer than you have and who literally, I mean, literally with our blood, sweat, and tears, paved the way for everybody else's freedom struggle in this country. I'm literally. And then have the descendants of those people act like none of that ever happened. Like our story isn't even a part of the narrative and their current struggle, and that and acting as if we're not still currently struggling as well. But then the very same people want to get up and say, well, we need to be united. How do you expect me to be united when you act as if my story doesn't matter? You can't do that. We really need to stop allowing that to happen. The last point I think you have on your sheet is black life under progressive rule, under white progressive rule. This is a very interesting story.
Mm-hmm.
It's very interesting, and it's not a story because it is the truth. And this kind of situation that's going on in California is the culmination of what is going to happen if we don't get this so-called resistance right in this progressive movement. Because what you'll have happen is a bunch of so-called progressive people passing all of these laws that are benefiting mostly white people and still disenfranchising black people and poor white people because they don't think these people's stories, they don't think these people's struggles, they didn't think they needed to talk about black issues. They didn't think they needed to talk about the income gap between black women and white women. All they needed to do was deal with Me Too.
You know what showed me that and I don't want to forgive me for I don't want this, you know, I don't want to just paint a broad brush, but you know what showed me that there was a certain part of progressivism that didn't give a damn about how I live.
What?
Whole Foods.
What do you mean?
Whole Foods, when they didn't want to build a supermarket where I lived at, and when they were sitting up here telling me that when it was known that people like me lived in a food desert, when it was known that people like us didn't have access to fresh fruits and
Right.
vegetables
Mm-hmm.
and this and that and the other. And then here comes Whole Foods, started by progressives,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
True.
Yeah,
True.
started by progressives, but yet, when the Whole Foods, still ain't no Whole Foods where I live.
There's no
You know
Whole
what I
Food
mean?
in the
Still wasn't no
hoods.
Whole Food where I live. And what I'm saying is the fact that it's not what we say
Mm-hmm.
that's progressive.
Mm-hmm.
If
Mm-hmm.
progressivism does not help those who are who are at the bottom, what I'm sure to say, if progressivism doesn't equal the playing, pardon me, equal the playing field, which is what progressivism is supposed to do,
Uh-huh.
then it's nothing but a bunch of talk.
Right.
You know what I mean? I saw Whole Foods and I said, well, man, this is a great thing. If Whole Foods, when it first started coming out, and I said, man, Whole Foods would be good because I mean, in the inner cities and stuff like that, we're being totally underserved
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to groceries and all this other kind of stuff. And I said, well, this would be a very good um, plan. This would be a very good thing to help poor folks out
Right.
to
Right.
have access to vegetables and
Fresh foods,
yeah,
better
yeah,
food choices.
right,
Yeah.
right. And when they seemed like, well, they didn't want to build a supermarket where we lived at, then that just showed me, man, that there was a part of progressivism, man. That's a straight up total lie.
Mm.
That it ain't about equalizing the playing field. That it was about capitalism, like everything else was about capitalism.
Oh, that's
You know
perfect.
what I mean? So that's what showed me from the door that all progressives aren't equal.
Hmm. And the story of so-called progressive California is a perfect encapsulation of
Yeah,
that.
but I wanna save that
But
because I really want to do I want to do some CNN expose shit with this like because I really think that we could learn a lot from California. And
okay.
I think that we could learn a lot from Seattle. I think that we could learn a lot from the so-called progressive states where black people are still being called niggas in Starbucks,
Uh-huh.
and
Huh.
how
Uh-huh.
and where look, we just had a story about a year or so ago of a black professor that was called a bunch of n words
Mm-hmm.
at a Starbucks.
Mm-hmm.
We could talk about how the skinhead movement is growing out there in Oregon.
Yep.
And we could talk about how California, and that's the reason why I didn't want to just flash through this because I think that California could be a case study of what it would be like for black folks if progressives and especially white progressives ever really got got in charge.
Yeah. I mean,
California's a case study for that.
yeah, yeah, because everybody's thinking that it's going to be this wonderful utopia in the Californias and the Colorados, with the legalization of weed and oh, everything's so wonderful. But black people are still coming up shortchanged under better so-called progressive, and that's a problem. And that is why, regardless of the monkey show that is going on right now, I'm sure y'all, this just I when we read this transcript tomorrow and we do our show and we respond to some of the foolishness that was actually said tonight in our show, our regular show tomorrow, I'm sure we're gonna have to. There's gonna have to be some meditation because you know what this reminds me of? Just looking at the corner of my eye, it reminds me of our favorite Amazon
Oh
series,
yeah, House of
House
Cards.
of
That's
Cards.
Netflix.
But oh, Netflix. But it really reminds me of Man in the High Castle.
Oh my God, yes.
It really does. And if you've never watched Man in the High Castle, we encourage you to because it's a great, great
And I
series.
want to apologize to one because we've been sick lately with the flu and I'm still feeling the effects of it. My head feels like it's throbbing.
Oh,
So I mean, I'm still like trying to get through this flu thing here. So
yeah.
forgive me, y'all. I'm just my thoughts ain't really been the way it is because I'm still a little muddled a little bit. But what I'm saying is, if you take anything out of all of the incoherent thoughts I've been throwing out
They
there,
were not
what I'm
incoherent.
trying to say is is the fact I still haven't seen progressivism in this country as the social equalizer that it could be.
Mm-hmm.
It's still a caste system, even within progressivism, and it's we got to tweak this. And I'm just saying, if folks, if we are going to use progressive policies to make, as the founding fathers say, a more perfect union, then we got to tweak this.
Mm-hmm.
And we're only going to tweak this is when we take ourselves out of it.
Mm.
When we
Mm-hmm.
take ourselves out of it, when we take the elitism out of it, when we take all these things out of it, and really make it a real a social movement that really levels the playing field and equalize the playing field. But right now, yeah, I mean, to you like some of the examples that I put forward. Nah, man, poor people aren't doing well under progressive rule
Mm-mm.
in various parts of this country. They're not, and there's still resistance in a lot of part of the country towards a living wage and toward a lot of these things, and these are ran by so-called progressive people.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm saying is the fact that it's not about what we call ourselves. It's not about just being, just saying, well, I'm not a conservative, and just saying, well, I'm not as bad as this guy. I mean, if we really going to make significant changes in this country through policies and politics, which is we can't avoid that, then we have to, we have to get out of the type of progressivism that you see practiced in places where people are still catching hell. You might as well live under conservatism,
Right.
where when it comes to how some of these places are being ran.
Yeah, I mean, and we can look at the response that we see in the groups that we work with what happened last summer at UNAC, where we're supposed to be coalescing and rebuilding an anti-war movement and an anti-imperialism movement that needs to happen, but we're dealing with racism from so-called progressives because they don't want to talk about black issues at a peace conference, as if black people haven't been on the receiving end of all imperialism and war in this country, in this world. Black and brown and non-European people, come on.
Mm-hmm.
That we see it when we have groups that we work with, like One DC and Empower DC, that focus on tenants' rights in who people who live in public housing, like our friends who down in Richmond, the Virginia Defenders,
Mm-hmm.
who focus on working with poor people who work in public housing and protecting them. And you got, because most of those people are black, and most of the disenfranchisement they experience is directly rooted to systemic racism. You got a bunch of progressive white people who don't want to deal with that because they don't think racism is that important. They don't think racism is as important as Medicare for all. So they'll push Medicare for all, but then they won't admit that even if we get Medicare for all, because systemic racism is a thing, black people will still be discriminated against in a system where we have Medicare for all, because discrimination against black people in healthcare is a real thing and it always has been. So, this whole idea of all these people being um, aware of the problems in politics on a national level, and the system is corrupt, and the oligarchy needs to be challenged and all this kind of stuff. That's all fine, good, and wonderful. But if you're not willing to work with the most disenfranchised at the local level where you are, if you're not willing to sit there and stop telling people that in order to be really real progressives they need to eat certain foods, and they need to invest in water filters, and if you're not willing to stop telling people who are not like you how to live because of your choices, and listen to the stories of people who've been living this struggle, Them all their lives, all our lives, and all our parents' lives, and all our grandparents' lives, 2, 3 generations, 10 generations of ancestors before us, if you're not willing to listen to how we've been fighting this thing that's new to you, that you suddenly feel a need to resist, your resistance is going to be futile. Futile. Because that's why we have Donald Trump. We don't have Donald Trump because of any one particular incident in the history of politics. We have Donald Trump because a whole bunch of white people in this country did not listen to the people who have been struggling against this system from the beginning. And as many coalitions as we've tried to build with other groups of people, and we have, the reason we have not gotten farther than we have, it's not because we were weak, it's not because we were badly organized, it's not because we didn't have policies and we didn't accurately articulate what we wanted, and it's not because we didn't have political power or money. It was because, quite simply, the majority population in this country continued to vote for the system because it served y'all. And now in 2017, well, 2016, when the election happened, now in 2016, when the system stopped serving you, now you want to resist. But do you really? That's the question. That's the question. It's not that we don't have an answer to, we don't like the answer we're getting. So we got a lot of work to do. And like my honeyboo over here said, we've been sick. We're still sick. But we wanted to give people some other stuff to think about tonight, other than this current Tantrump train wreck 3-ring circus that's going on over here. Because regardless of what they do in this chamber, this struggle that we live, that we've been talking about since 2012.
Yeah.
I don't know, whenever, like a year after we got married, that we've been talking about on this platform, but that we've been living and actively working against practically all our adult lives, that we learn from our parents, that goes on regardless of what goes on here. And it's been going on. What we always say, we tried to tell you. But now that you're here, pull up a chair and let's get serious about this work. So thanks, y'all, for tuning in to this special State of the Dysfunction edition of Live and Coffee Current Events and Politics in Luqman Nation. And thank you very much for realizing that you have to resist. Thanks to State of the Resistance for having this platform so that we could do this. And tune in tomorrow night. Are we going to be well enough to? Are we going to feel good enough tomorrow night
I hope so.
to do a regular show? We should be doing a regular show on Coffee Current Events and Politics tomorrow night at our regular time, 6:30 p.m. Eastern. Is that right? Okay, 6:30 p.m. Eastern time on Coffee Current Events and Politics in Luqman Nation. Both of us are going to take some cold medicine and go to bed. We're going to turn this mess off. We're going to deal with it tomorrow. Thank y'all very much. Y'all take really, really good care of yourselves and each other. Peace.